Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dr. to Doctor in the Chat Room with Dr. Rhonda Shaw and Dr. Nicole West. We thank you guys for coming back to share with us on another edition of Dr. to Doctor in the Chat Room, where we discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. We thank you so much for taking this time out of your schedule to be with us, and we ask that you guys continue to stay safe during this pandemic. Last week, we were here with our special guest, Dr. William Arnold.
There you
go. He was sharing with us information about reentry after incarceration and what that looks like. He shared a bit of his story with us, and we're so glad that he's come back again to continue this discussion. Let me say hello to my co-host, Dr. Nicole West. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I meant to tell you on last week that little clip that you sent me of my bonus grandson hitting that basketball shot was everything.
Oh my goodness. You know, watching this kid play anything, I mean, he's just an athlete and he loves it and he has fun. And, you know, it's just, I didn't play sports this young, you know, so y'all, my Jackson, I talk about it all the time, but he's 7.
Yeah.
And I don't think I played sports until at least middle school.
Yeah.
So to see him out there, you know, playing defense and hitting jump shots, I mean, it brings my heart joy. So,
but with your height, because with my kids, both my kids are tall. Unlike their mama, but like, every time they went to a new school, the coaches was like, "Do they play basketball?" Oh, yeah. You know, people just assume if you're tall, you play sports. So did people just assume you played?
They assumed, they made me, forced me. I did not like basketball. I was lazy. I don't want to run up and down the court. But I had to play because I was tall. I was probably 5'9" in high school. So I had to play. And I did not enjoy it. I did enjoy volleyball, but I did not enjoy basketball. But yes, I did play.
Well, I absolutely loved it. But anyway, I was glad to see him doing his thing because he does love to play basketball. How are you, Dr. Arnold? How are you today?
Well, my dad and my granddad would say I'm jammed up and jellied down. How about yourself?
What exactly does that mean?
Oh God, she always wants to know what something means, so you don't have to go ahead.
It means I'm in a good space.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's like a Southern, you know, thing. I'm from upstate New York, so when y'all say things, sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I've never heard of that one.
Something my granddad used to say, my dad says it, and all my cousins.
Okay.
Jammed up and jellied down.
Jammed up.
My son posted something on. He commented on something she posted one day on Facebook. And her response was, "I don't know what that means, but it sure is funny."
I know it's funny. But I can't tell you what it means.
You go, girl.
So listen, you've told us a lot about reentry, and I want you to break down some of those things that you talked about that are definite needs. But before you move into that, I want to start with this because you kind of explained how it was for you on the inside. You know, you were the educated Black man, you were in a predominantly white facility and all of that. So did you kind of become, quote unquote, the role model for inmates? Did people the other inmates start to depend on you for information or guidance in certain situations because of how you were able to handle yourself or your business?
I wouldn't necessarily say depend on me, but I became a source of information and also a voice, if you will, for inmates because I was able to finagle my way onto what's called the Inmate Council, which is like the prison government association. The monthly meeting where you represented your, I'll call it your pod, or at least like your dorm. Each dorm had 24 cells, 2 men per cell, so 48 men. So I would take their concerns each month. They would list their concerns or questions about things going on at the prison, about things they want change for, and then it would go to this meeting with the warden and his assistant warden of treatment and his assistant head of warden of security, and pose these questions.
Mhm.
So where the norm, I think, had been where inmates would just go and, okay, they tell them no. My thing was a follow-up. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation. And in that environment, people who were in power were not used to inmates questioning their authority.
Yeah.
And because I was in prison, I understood that security was an important thing. But I also realized that as a man asking questions about something that was not security related, I'm not trying to break out or let anybody break in. I'm simply questioning, how can we make this environment, this process, this system of corrections correct?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make certain that things we are asking that are just natural human rights be addressed, and not with the no or because the policy said so? So as a result, I wanted other inmates to see that they are still people, they still have power, even though they're in this position, or this seemingly position of powerlessness. So that was important to me in seeing wrong and identifying wrong and using the voice that I had. Because I felt that if I didn't, I would be doing a disservice to those who had poured into me.
Mm-hmm. So likewise, then, if you became a source of information for the inmates, or sort of a, role model, did your level of education make you a threat to the correction officers? Historically, we are not supposed to be intelligent. We are not supposed to be, we're not supposed to carry ourselves with any kind of, dignity. But you going into prison as an educated man with a PhD, did that cause any issues for you with the corrections officers?
No, that didn't cause issues. What caused issues was my nature. And my nature, if like my dad, is to be talkative. My nature is to be defiant. My nature is to not let it lay down and let crap be crap.
Right.
And I have to insert, when you say defiant, I hear you saying defying the quote unquote norms.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not defiant just to be defiant. I just want to.
No, exactly. No, not because.
Mm-hmm. I know. I mean, because I know your dad, right? So I kind of know.
Defiant of, again, when you see wrong being done,
right?
You see abuse of power, you address it. You don't let it slide. But also in knowing how to address it. I think perhaps one of the biggest challenges for the people I dealt with in the prison, the guards, was that I didn't approach. My defiance was never yelling, cussing, violence. My defiance was addressing it in an articulate way to let you know that I know there's another side to that story. Mm-hmm. I know the fuller story. So don't give me a turd and tell me it's chocolate. I know the difference in turds and chocolate. I'm gonna make certain we get to the chocolate while you present this turd.
Right.
Yeah. So that was it. Yeah.
That, Dr. Shaw, you laughing? Is that another Southern thing that just went over my head? I have it reminds me of a college roommate of mine. She said her dad used to always say, "Don't PISS on my leg and tell me it's raining."
I know the difference. Yeah. Like I tell people, I eat chocolate and make turds, so I know there's a difference.
Yes, there is a difference.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I might edit that out, but yeah.
No.
So, and we're still going to get to those most important things, but when you talk about people being institutionalized, you kind of mentioned that on the last show. How difficult is it to change attitudes about crime, and beliefs about crime and even how people view the system. How difficult is it to just change mindsets? We talk on this show about mindsets and how mindset is everything, right? How difficult is that piece?
It's probably one of the hardest things I think I've had to do in life. Because when you talk about mindsets, it's again how you think, how you see the world, what you're fixated on. And because people in my immediate circle were not going to jail, were not going to prison, were not getting involved with the criminal justice system on the side, I never really gave any thought to it. And again, that's something I feel I need to apologize for, because when I went to prison, I had a maternal cousin and a paternal cousin, so a cousin on either side, who was doing life sentences. But I still did not think about how that was affecting Black men, how it was affecting Black communities, how it was affecting people. Simply because of just information that I knew in both situations. But when you're there and when you see the horrors and you experience them and they're in you, you know that it's real. Because I never thought, for example, I never considered owning a gun. I'm not a gun person. But of course, I met some people in prison, and my conversations with them telling me about stuff they had done, I was thinking, I need a gun when I get out.
Yeah.
Just simply because of, these are folks that I've become friends with to some degree, but for them to tell me about stuff they've done, you realize there are some people still at the end of the day who are doing some very bad things, right? So I get out of prison and I actually go to a gun class. And I'm even more horrified of guns after that. And even though knowing that there are people out there doing bad things and you possibly may need protection, because I've never been one who believed in guns. And I know if there's a possibility of me coming up against a person where I may need a gun simply because of the way the world works. My mindset is that that's not something that's a part of who I am. Even though I know that there's crime and there's potential of violence always, particularly in Memphis. So it's this thing of realizing who you are at your core and trying to work within that space to affect change. And because I know that change needs to happen in the criminal justice system, is how best do I fight that? How best do I fight for reentry? How best do I fight for criminal review units, district attorney accountability? How best do I fight the system in that way so that people are not serving longer sentences, so that people are not being wrongfully convicted, so that people are not being abused by the system that is said to have been put in place to help us.
That's a really good segue into what I wanted to ask. I'm sure that there are many, many, many programs out there being implemented with the goal of reducing recidivism, improving the reentry process, right?
Sure.
But I'm just thinking that maybe not so many of these programs are necessarily effective. And if that's inaccurate information, please correct me. But how do we put something together? I mean, I just feel like we as in states, right, and institutions, nonprofits, get these funds, all these funds, right? And it's for these particular purposes and not just reentry and recidivism, so many other things. But we never see the fruits. Right. So what needs to happen for us to be able to say, we finally got something that really works?
That's another one.
Why are we just peeing in the wind? That's another Southern thing.
Exactly, because it's just blowing away. You're not getting anything out of it. So I get it. And there can be so many answers to that question, and I can't necessarily say that I have the right answer, but I have some ideas. First, we have to look at the numbers, and it goes back to being realistic. In that, in America, 95% of the people who are incarcerated in jails and prisons are going to come. So that's first. So when you think about it being roughly 6 million people incarcerated in America, 95% of them have what's called an out date, a date they're going to get out, so they're not doing life.
Right.
So you got to pick up first. So it means there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be going through the reentry process. So how do we begin to plan for that? Traditionally, reentry offices from a governmental perspective are attached to the Department of Correction. So when you think about reentry, and as I said, is that process of helping, or not necessarily helping, but of people reentering society after incarceration, and you're looking for guidance, you're looking for services, you're looking for acceptance. Now you have the Office of Correction or the Department of Correction, these people who traumatize, dehumanize you are now saying, we've given you the stick. Now here's the carrot to help you reenter society. There's a disconnect. You get what I'm saying? There's a disconnect. So how do we begin to rethink reentry is a big part of it in terms of taking it out of corrections and beginning to take the funds and putting it in different areas where whether it's human services, whether it's labor, whether it's something that has a desired effect other than correction, because we discussed earlier that that's incorrect. How do we begin to take those resources and rethink reintegration, rethink reentry in a way that is not connected to something that has harmed people, but in a way that's going to help people? How do we begin to leverage those services that state departments have, like Department of Human Services here in Tennessee has a child support modification program. Something we don't think about, but when you've been incarcerated for 6 months, 6 years, 16 years, and you have children, you get out, you still got to pay that. So how do we help them through that process? We talked earlier about driver's license. I can tell you about a story about a gentleman just recently who got out of prison who had $9,000 in traffic fines. So how do we begin to say, okay, in the grand scheme of things, we see that this $9,000, this barrier is keeping this man from being able to get a driver's license. He already has a job, but now he can't get to that job because it's $9,000. How important is this $9,000 to the overall budget of the state of Tennessee?
Yeah.
Or is it more important for this man to get to work, to get back and forth so he can feed his family and reintegrate in society, and then have to do something that's going to make him have to steal this $9,000, take this $9,000 through unnecessary or inhumane ways, just so we can pay the state of Tennessee? And the state of Tennessee knows they had this man in prison for the last X amount of years. So you know why these fines accrue.
And they made it, without that $9,000.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do we, as I say, how do we begin to rethink these things and to use some very people-focused, common sense approaches, understanding, again, the lived experience and the life of this person, and if we were truly trying to help this person get to the best life, get to a successful space, get to a space where they can, again, be a positive contributor to society, there's some things that we just have to make concessions for. As the power players, as the departments of whatever, as legislators, to simply remove. Because you got to remember, this person is coming out of this horrible traumatic experience, so they're already at a disadvantage. They're already at a disadvantage, and now the powers that be have the power to remove these other, as I keep calling them, artificial barriers. Because at the end of the day, him or her, they're gonna need some counseling, they're gonna need to talk to somebody, they're gonna need to work through some other things just so they can get to work.
Yeah.
Just so they can sit at a dinner table and talk to people. Just so they can walk in a restaurant and order a Happy Meal and not feel uncomfortable because there are people walking or running behind them.
Yeah.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, as Dr. King said, asking a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps, but the man ain't got no boots.
Right.
We're going to talk more when we come back from break. We'll be right back on 94.7 FM. And we're back on 94.7 FM. We are here talking about reentry after incarceration. Wanted you to go ahead and talk about those bigger challenges that you mentioned last week, of those that are newly released from prison. Talk about those things and maybe even provide with each one of them, if you could, what some of your ideas are on, what would be helpful and beneficial to people.
Sure. Well, again, when a person comes out of prison, they're dealing with a specific set of challenges. Across the board, everyone's dealing with a place to stay, They're dealing with getting a job. They're dealing with the lack of insurance. So, those basic needs. But then there's also, as I say, those internal things. You're just dealing with, how do I fit into this world? What is this world all about? How do I make sense of seeing things that I've not seen constantly? Like just seeing people run or seeing people not walk in a straight line. That still bothers me, because in prison and in jail, you're used to controlled movement.
Wow.
Not as a prisoner, as an inmate, you're not allowed to run unless you're at the rec yard. If you are running, you will be written up and you will be placed in the hold. So when you see running, it's normally a guard going to the aid of another guard. And it lets you know something's going on. So then you're able to walk into a mall, or you walk into a meeting place and you see all this movement. You're not used to seeing that. So how do you just make sense of those simple things that you're not used to? So you have a lot going on in your head, and you think of people who are constantly worrying, well, the rent is due, I got to do this. So you can't even get to that point, because you're just trying to make sense of these normal day-to-day things that you're not used to. The different sounds, the movement of traffic. The first time I rode in a car after I got out of prison, I got car sick, because I wasn't used to the movement. Because if you think, I was in prison 6 years, 9 months, you're not riding in cars, you're walking everywhere. You're not going up and down stairs at the prison where I was housed. They're all one-story buildings. So I remember going to my sister's for the holidays, just going up and down the stairs. The challenge that it put on my hips and my legs, because I wasn't used to going up and down stairs. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, there are a lot of different things that an individual is dealing with, and then on top of that, you have these barriers like not having housing, not having health care, wondering where you're going to get your next meal from. So how do we begin to, as I say, rethink this approach to reentry that will aid people in the best way possible? And I think it starts first with just an assessment of an individual's needs. So how do we have that central location where we can find out, what is it that you need? Do you need housing right now? Or do you need something transitional? What is your level of education? What is your level of job training?
So let me ask you this, as you're
Sure.
talking about the housing piece, because I don't know if it was you or the other guest that we had, James Clay, that talked about, depending on the crime, you may not be able to go to like the halfway houses. Is that right?
Yeah. So I can give you an example of that. There was a gentleman who was scheduled to get released right before I got out. He was telling me, Doc, when I get out of here, I'm going to have to live under a bridge. And I was like, what? He said, you might live under a bridge. And I was like, quit joking. He said, no. He said, one halfway house in Nashville, where he was going back to, doesn't take arsons. And he had an arson shop.
Oh, wow.
Another halfway house doesn't take people with sex offenses. And he had a sex offense. So he was caught in this space where, based on what he had been charged in different situations, there were parameters that said you couldn't stay here. So last I heard, he did end up living under a bridge, and then had violated his probation. He was doing 30 days in the county jail. Another story, a guy that just got out in August that I know, he also had a sex offense, and because of the provisions of his probation, he can't live or work in certain places. I was working with him to get a job, and the guy who was the supervisor of the place was going to hire him. It was going to be a salary position with benefits, a dream for a person to get within months.
Yeah.
But because of where the office was located in connection to a school, he could not work there.
Yeah.
So there's this. When I heard you say catch-22 earlier, it's a horrible catch-22.
Yeah.
When you're telling a person that you've got to get a job within X amount of days, you want them to have livable wages, and you want them to be self-sustaining. And then here's an opportunity, and you're saying no, but. So you're constantly pushing this person back down in this hole. You're constantly taking away their dignity. You're constantly charging them for a debt to society that supposedly had been paid when they went to prison and served their time. So we throw around, these cliches innocent until proven guilty,
Mhm.
debt to society, debt paid. I don't know about y'all, but once I get the receipt and I pay for something, you don't get to keep charging me. That's not how it works.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And so it's a shame that, society, particularly here in Tennessee, with with the laws and the other things, continue to charge people, continue to take from people, continue to allow people to get back to some point of being a self-sustaining, successful
Member of
citizen.
society. So there
Yeah.
lies the significance of that assessment piece that you talked about, and how on the last show we talked about how customized this process is going to be, because that guy that had the sex offense and the arson charge needs something totally different from the guy that robbed somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this process even happening, or is this just a an idea of the way it should be happening? I think about in hospitals, for example, they have social workers whose job it is to say, maybe you can't go home right now, so we have to find you another facility or some sort of rehab organization where you can go and get your needs met before you transition back home. Or if they don't have housing at all, they have social workers to figure these things out for people. So is that not a part of our correctional process? And if not, what
Do we make it a part?
Yeah.
And as I say, it's going to take a comprehensive effort where you're going to have a room full of folks who have access to resources,
Yeah.
who are willing to discuss how those resources can come together and effectively help these folks. And I dare you, and I challenge you all to take a look at offices of reentry around the nation. Just go to their websites and see what you'll find. And what's sad is that you'll often see a paragraph that says, John Smith is the director of the Office of Reentry, and some statement that says, we believe that reentry is an important part of the adjudication process. But there's nothing that lists what services are available, what this office truly does, who else you need to contact. So when you again think of number of the people who are in prison and who are in jail, we've already established. Well, Richard Pryor said it best. He said that he went to jail, he went looking for justice, and that's all he found was just us. Right? So you're finding a number of people of color, a number of poor people, a number of uneducated people. And now you're telling these people they got to go to the internet. They got to now go across the digital divide and go to a website that has a paragraph that says, we believe that reentry is important. But you're not telling me what reentry is. You're not telling me how to get access to these reentry services. You're not telling me what I can do to help heal myself. You're not telling me anything. So essentially, it's lip service, and it's a window dressing.
And it's very indicative of how involved politics are in everything, right? I mean, it's just political, and what can make a person look good and what makes them sound good when they're running for office. But don't even get me started. I mean, like, politics are everywhere, and not necessarily in the best sense, like in the best way, but they are so everywhere. Like I said on the last show, you got nonprofit organizations, you got all these people get money to do all the things that you're talking about. And then here lies the person that can say, I think your perspective is so great. And I hate to say about the blessings in disguise sometimes, but I do feel that way. I personally feel that way. And I hate to say maybe your situation is, but here's a person that has a perspective that you do. And it's because of your situation, right? It's probably more so because you were wrongfully accused, right? And not because you went in and did time because of something you actually did. So you got to look at things from a totally different, perspective. Yep. And so we've got somebody that has the knowledge, that knows what key people and all the stakeholders that need to be at the table. And to me, it's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's put the money over here and give this person or persons the opportunity to go, whether even if it's traveling across the world, to look at what other things or programs are in place or being implemented, and like, you know, what their success rate is and what's working, what's not working. I mean, it's just not rocket science. But what does that mean? Does it mean we really don't want things to be better? Because it ain't rocket science. I mean, like, I've never done time, but good grief.
Right. The problem, I think, is how much money it makes in this country. Like, I think that's what the issue is. And so we don't have a motivation to change it because it's a huge business, where other countries have done all kinds of research on rehabilitation and the right way to do it. But America, I mean, this is the right way to do it because it makes so much money. So we're just going to keep doing it this way. And keep putting out people that don't have the skills or the resources to better their life, because they know they're going to come back and it's just going to make more money and make more money. I mean, it's America, people. like they said in Coming to America, this is America, Jack. So.
That's what I think that's the deciding thing, is that it's the business model of incarceration. Warehousing people is about locking them up. And if you know that 95% of them are coming out, why isn't there a business model to make money off of that? You're gonna make money off housing them and messing them up. Why isn't there the flip side that you know they're getting out some sort of business model? Is it because no one has sat down to look at how can I also make money of healing people, of restoring people, of restoring families, of truly restoring communities? So, you know, and until it starts, and I say it in terms of until that becomes the business model, and then society sees value in reentry, it sees value in the restoration of families and of communities, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I have kind of not necessarily a personal question, but one about your experience. So being in prison, knowing you are there, you know, you're wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted. What's the like usual response that you get when you profess your innocence in prison, right? Because I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are saying that they did not commit the crime that they are convicted of. And unfortunately, many of those may not have, and many of them may have. But did you typically feel like you were believed when you said that? Or is that just everybody's story in prison, or everybody says they didn't, you know, commit the crime?
Well, so the sort of culture in prison is that you don't really talk about your crime, no matter what it is. You don't ask people what they did if they don't volunteer it. You'll have people who may talk in general about, you know, couldn't afford a lawyer and I had a public defender and the lawyer was crap, or you know, you would hear people say, yeah, and it's the biggest rumor mill in any 8th grade lunchroom, right? So you have a bunch of guys, yeah, he's here and he had a paid lawyer. So it was sort of a thing that folks couldn't understand how some people ended up in prison when they didn't have a public defender, because as I said, there are a number of poor and uneducated people in prison, and people who are just victims of circumstances. So it's just it's a hard thing to try and make sense of that environment when you know you're not supposed to be there. But it's not something you talk about unless you actually make a friend, if you will, that you feel comfortable having that conversation with. And I can say that, you know, by the grace of God, I was able to make friends with some folks there that I could have those conversations with about how I got railroaded, about how I'm not supposed to be here. But in the grand scheme of things, you're just whining when you do that, because you know, you're talking to somebody that's you know, Martin Luther King said it best: it don't matter how we all got here, but we all in the same boat. So we got to learn to live together, what is brothers or perish as fools. So we're all here. So how do we get through it together? How best do we support each other and do what's called staying out the way. Staying out the way of the guards, staying out the way of the gang, staying out the way of just a lot of the mess that goes on in that environment. And that's, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there had to be one of those, I've just got to pinch myself kind of moments for you. And it had to have taken you a minute to come to terms with, I am here in this place. And, you know, it's like, this is real.
Yeah.
How long did that take for you?
I mean, as soon as it happened, I was in shock. I was immediately locked up when like 11:30 at night, when the verdict came back from the jury. And I think it wasn't until spring of 2014 when I lost my first appeal that I was like, because I'm thinking, you know, this system is going to right itself. It's not right itself. I'm not supposed to be here. So when I lost my first appeal, I was crushed, and I went into probably the first huge depression that I can remember behind bars, because I'm thinking I've given this system. I'm still thinking, hey, it's going to pan out, and I always believe that. But I've given the system a chance. We've done this appeal. Why aren't they seeing this? So it angers you, but it also is this moment of, I can't quit. You know, I think about when I had a hard class in college, I could drop that college. I mean, I could drop that class. I think about when I'm divorced. When I was married, I could file divorce papers. I think about when I was joining organizations and going through rites of passages. I still had that option to quit and say, I don't want to do this anymore. But this was the time I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I had to put it in the hands of God and just say, hey, I'm gonna show up every day and let you show out. But I knew I couldn't quit because it was something you couldn't quit. You had to, as they say, man up.
Yeah.
And that's what it came down to.
We're going to go to break, and we will be right back on 94.7 FM in a moment. We'll see you guys in a minute.
And we are back on Doctor to Doctor in the chat room. We have Dr. William Arnold here with us. And I wanted to hit on something that we talked a little bit about right before we took a break. You had mentioned, you know, having some appeals that didn't pan out the way you would have wanted. So I'm wondering, how much confidence do you have in the justice system now, after being wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted, and then having, you know, one or two appeals not go well? How has that impacted your level of confidence for the justice system?
If anything, it's increased my faith in God. And I say that because I knew that every level of this, it was man. And man, as we know, is imperfect. And, you know, I'm in this weird space because this was a system that wrongfully convicted me, but then it finally corrected itself. Once it was understood. So the case was overturned, the charges were dismissed, sentence vacated. So I reached a point that very few people do. But I don't believe it's because the justice system is perfect or that the justice system is correct. I think if nothing else, it was just the power of God. And I have to say that because throughout it all, I had to have not faith in man because it was man that put me there. And to have faith in God because it was God that kept me there, and it was God that got me out of there because God was able to show man that you made a mistake. So with that, it makes me very angry at the justice system. It makes me very distrusting of the justice system. But no, I can't necessarily say that this system will ever be anything other than a broken system, because the unfortunate part is that we can't just tear it down and start over with something, because then we'll have anarchy. So the question is, how do we begin to stop the bleeding? How do we begin to make certain that there is more accountability for district attorneys, for people who work in the areas of defense, for the systems that are in place? How do we repair those systems so that we have a better criminal justice system? because at the end of the day, human nature, the nature of making mistakes, the nature of being petty, the nature of just humans is going to always be a part of the systemic racism. These things are going to always be a part of the criminal justice system. So how do we, how do we minimize the negative impact that they have? I think that's how we try and make this criminal justice system better.
So I was thinking about, for anybody coming out of prison, or anybody, most people probably don't even know where to begin. Like, it's probably such an overwhelming process to navigate in your mind or whatever. But I would imagine with the support that you already had on inside from your family, right? And going through, even when you were doing the appeal processes and all of that, you were already, forward thinking about, what's next, for your life, when many people may not think about it because they don't have that same level of support, right? They probably don't even know how to get past thinking like, what am I gonna do? Because I have anybody to rely on or whatever. What would you say, to those inmates, if you could talk to them that feel like I don't have any support, I don't have, what would be your advice to them?
To learn first how to advocate for yourself, understand the questions that you need to ask staff on the inside, because there are people who are paid to do reentry. The question is whether or not they're doing reentry and they're following the procedures and the policies is important, because again, when I say advocate for yourselves, very few people know how to do that. So it goes back to, again, educating yourself on what services are available, what steps are in place to help you through this process, because there is help that's available. The second piece would be, of course, making certain that those people who are responsible for putting these services in place are doing them in a timely and effective manner, and making certain that they are there. Because for example, when I got out, I was just told qualify for food stamps. I wasn't told where I could get food stamps. I wasn't told how to get health care. Couldn't find anything that let me know these things. A number of the websites that I found were dated, or rather outdated. But because I had at least some understanding of the internet, I could do that. So folks who are coming out need to understand how to get information. You can't find things anymore on bulletin boards, because there's no central bulletin board things. So understanding how to get digital literacy, also having a level of courage to step outside of what you know, because it takes a level of strength and courage to do reentry, because you're being taken, or whether or not you realize that you've been institutionalized and you've been in this environment that has controlled you and that has broken you in a lot of ways. So now you have to courageously step out of that and step into something else, and indeed you're going to be able to move forward in life. So you have to embrace change. You have to embrace a sense of responsibility again for your own life. Getting up on time without somebody telling you. Doing the things necessary, whether it's budgeting, paying bills, understanding that, again, you are free. So there needs to be things put in place to help folks with that. And because I can tell you, when I was in prison, I met guys 40 years old who've been in prison since they were 15, who had never driven a car, who had never worked a job. So now you've been a man in this environment, but you've not been a man in the world. So how do you learn how to become a man and be responsible at 40 or 50 years old, because you've been essentially raised in this environment? So there are and as I say, everyone's lived experience is different. So how do you have those assessments in place so that you can give this person the services that he or she needs to at least be at a level of functioning in the free world? How do you make that equitable? Because I said everybody needs something different. My needs were not the needs of the average person re-entering society, but there still needs to be a level of courage and responsibility. because at the end of the day, I still have to learn again how to take care of myself and how to function in the world.
So if a person, is it true or is this accurate that if a person does time in prison, they are automatically institutionalized? And if not, if that is not true, what distinguishes one person going in and one going in and they're not?
I've never heard that, but I can definitely say you're traumatized, because if we can all talk and about slavery, about what we think it was like, and see it in movies, but until you're at a place where, as I said, you cannot leave, you have to do what this person says, and they feel empowered to talk to you any kind of way and make up any kind of story that they want about you, and because you exist in that space, you're automatically considered as evil, as a liar, as less than human. So I wouldn't say that every person is institutionalized, but every person is traumatized. Because if you've experienced that in 1 day, 1 hour, 1 week, 1 year, that's going to change you forever. Because you've been in this space where you were able to get as close to slavery, if you will, as a person in modern day society really can. Where your life is totally being controlled by someone else, and you cannot do anything about it.
Wow. That was powerful. I mean, that just made me think about how serious of an impact being in jail and or prison, and I know that they are two totally separate entities, but similar in probably the impact of trauma that a person might experience from living in either of those environments.
Yeah, because I can see myself being traumatized just by being put in handcuffs.
Absolutely.
Like I'm put in the police car, but never actually transported to jail. But I mean, just that alone.
Right.
You cannot open the door of that car unless somebody gives you permission to. And all you want to do is get out of a car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And
so
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, I can't imagine. I mean, we talked a little bit about it earlier when you heard the verdict and how many things went through your mind about, is this real life? Is this really happening? Are they really taking me away? Am I really getting in the back of the, police car or on that bus that you see on TV where they take all the inmates, to prison? Like, I can't imagine all of the different things that your mind went through and all the emotions and all of the, thoughts. I mean, it seems unreal to me. As a person who's never gone through it. So I just can't imagine. And these are millions of people every single day going through these same kinds of emotions and trauma. And then they do their time, quote unquote, and then they're just released.
They almost really never stop doing time. That's the unfortunate piece. So there's this strain on family, and I know your family, and I know how supportive they have been to you. One of the probably biggest challenges is the financial strain. But for sure, I'm sure even little things like how you interact with family when you come home, and what things they may need to learn, to help you navigate through this as smoothly as possible. Can you take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about that and what that's like?
Yeah, that's again, that goes back to, as I say, lived experiences. For me, I just wanted to make certain that my family knew that I appreciated everything they've done and that I loved them, but that I also needed a lot of space. I didn't need a lot of questions. And unless I'm doing interviews, I don't take a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Just simply because it's a very, let's say, traumatic but very personal experience, and you're still trying to make sense of it. I'm still trying to make sense of it, and just when I'm talking to people from a professional standpoint, like on the job, in meetings, because in prison you're hyper vigilant and you're also a lot more aggressive than you are in regular life, because you always want to let it be known that any minute, if it's got to go down, be ready. So with that, I have to make certain and dial back that I'm not being overly aggressive in the conversations that I have with people, particularly at work. Because my thing is, we're here to get a job done. Let's get it done. We're gonna get it done by any means necessary. So I sometimes have to say, did I say that incorrectly? Or did I say that in a way that didn't come across right? Because at the end of the day, I'm still a dark skinned, solidly built Black man in the workforce. And I know that can be intimidating to some people.
Mhm.
So, you still have to walk this fine line, this tightrope, if you will, of getting the job done, getting the best out of folks, but also not putting yourself in a position, personal risk management, putting yourself in a position where you can be seen as a threat simply because you're just trying to get the job done and get it done in the best way you know how. So you have to try and dial back that prison stuff, as I call it, that becomes a part of it.
Mhm. You mentioned when you were here on the first show that you did with us, is that you would never mentor again. And I know that you are a part of a very prevalent fraternity, and they're big about mentoring and other community services. In what ways have you been able to find, have you found other ways to serve? Because I believe that you are a person of, servitude. So have you found other ways to provide services to the community that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, just now, I mean, this is a way to provide service, and I thank you both, Dr. Shaw and Dr. West, for just giving me the opportunity to share my story, to be able to educate and to communicate to people what it's like being on the inside, and more importantly, what it's like coming out, because we don't know what it's like to take care or to deal with loss until we lose. We don't know what it's like to take care of a sick relative until we have one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we can begin to have these conversations and to communicate openly and transparently ahead of time, so that people can use this information as a reference tool and as a way of saying, hey, I know somebody did that, let me connect you with them. That's one of the ways to serve, simply sharing your story, simply being able to help people through something, because we either all coming out of something or going through something. And just being able to give somebody that lifeline, I think, is a way to serve. So um, I think I'm always going to find ways to serve, but right now it's just, I think, sharing that story and making certain that people are aware of what the real world is like.
Yeah. Are there any specific resources or organizations maybe that either you used or that you might know of that might help someone, get back on their feet, so to speak, that might help them re-enter into society,
Yeah,
or might help them with housing or insurance? Are there any specific resources that you know of?
yeah. Well, like for example, here in Memphis, Shelby County has a really original Office of Reentry that is the only county Office of Reentry in the state of Tennessee. So that lets you know that if nothing else, Shelby County has given some thought to this issue.
Mm-hmm.
DeAndre Brown, good brother I had the opportunity to meet with, who's also a justice involved individual himself, is the current interim director of it. We've sat down and had a conversation. I consider him as an ally in the reentry space. Um, there are a number of state agencies. For example, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse has a behavioral program where anyone ages 3 years or older can get free mental health services and also meds. I strongly encourage that, because anybody coming out of this experience is going to need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
The process is going to need some sort of professional guidance in how to make this process, if you will, less stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also an Office of Reentry being created by the state of Tennessee, a comprehensive office that its whole purpose is to change the face of reentry. So there are a number of resources being put into this issue, and but there's still a lot of work that has to be done. But those are some of the things right here in Memphis that you can begin to take a look at, find out.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
Well, we can't thank you enough for coming back this week to share more information. We look forward to hearing from you again and talking with you again. Maybe when more things are being implemented, and you can talk to us about some good things maybe that are coming down the pipe for reentry for people that have been incarcerated. We thank you for sharing your story. We thank you for your time. We thank you guys for coming back another Saturday. And we ask that you be with us next week, same chat channel, same chat time, right here on 94.7 FM. We'll see you guys next week.